The sun bleeds crimson across Dubai's impossible skyline as another day dies in the city of gold and secrets. Glass towers pierce the Arabian sky like gleaming needles, each one a monument to ambition and excess. But as twilight surrenders to darkness, the city's perfect facade begins to crack, revealing the shadows that lurk beneath its polished surface. The timestamp on the security footage reads August 14th, 11:47 p.m. A figure moves through the marble lobby of an Al Bursha luxury apartment building. A young woman in a simple maid's uniform, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She walks with purpose, but her shoulders carry the weight of fear. The expensive marble beneath her worn shoes gleams under crystal chandeliers, creating a stark contrast between poverty and opulence that defines this glittering emirate. In a city built on gold and secrets, some disappearances are more dangerous than others. Nina Castillo had exactly 3 hours and 13 minutes left to live when she walked through those doors. The security camera captures her final voluntary steps. A 24-year-old domestic worker from the Philippines entering what she believed was hope, but what would become her tomb. Her reflection multiplies infinitely in the polished surfaces around her, as if the building itself is documenting her final moments. By morning, this footage would mysteriously vanish from the security system. The hard drives would show technical malfunctions. The backup servers would report data corruption. In Dubai, where everything is recorded and nothing is forgotten, Nina Castillo's final hours would be erased as efficiently as her life. August 15th, 6 a.m. The call to prayer echoes across Dubai as Rosa Delgado jolts awake in the cramped bedroom she shares with Nina in their Karama apartment. The morning routine is sacred among domestic workers. Early prayers, quick breakfast, rushing to catch the bus that will carry them to their employer's pristine villas. But this morning, something is wrong. Nina's bed is empty. Not just empty, untouched. The cheap polyester blanket lies flat and undisturbed, exactly as it had been folded the previous evening. Rosa's hands tremble as she checks the small bathroom they share, then searches through Nina's meager possessions. Everything is in place except Nina herself. Panic sets in slowly, then all at once. Nina's phone goes straight to voicemail, unusual for someone who never let her battery die, knowing her family in the Philippines depended on her weekly calls. Her employer, Mrs. Al-Mahmoud, hasn't seen her since the previous afternoon. The morning shift at the villa has already started, and Nina's absence will not go unnoticed or unpunished. But then Rosa discovers something that transforms concern into terror. Hidden beneath Nina's pillow, wrapped in a small towel, is an expensive iPhone. Sleek, pristine, worth months of their combined salaries. This is not Nina's phone. Nina owns a cracked Android device held together with electrical tape, purchased secondhand from another OFW heading home to Manila. Rosa's fingers shake as she powers on the device. No password protection, unusual for Nina, who guarded her privacy fiercely. The phone contains dozens of messages from a contact listed simply as H. The exchanges reveal fragments of a secret life, promises of marriage, discussions of visas, and increasingly desperate pleas for understanding. The final voice message, sent at 9:47 p.m. the previous night, freezes Rosa's blood. Nina's voice, barely above a whisper, speaking in rapid Tagalog. 8. I think I'm pregnant. I didn't want this. He told me I'd ruin his life if anyone finds out. He said if I speak, bad things will happen. I'm scared. Please pray for me. The recording ends abruptly, followed by the metallic silence of a phone line cut dead. These would prove to be Nina Castillo's final recorded words, a confession and a prayer rolled into one desperate plea. The players in this tragedy could not have been more different. Nina Castillo, born in the rice fields of Nueva Ecija, raised on faith and sacrifice, working in Dubai to lift her family from poverty. Her life measured in remittances sent home, in rosary beads worn smooth by desperate prayers, in the careful counting of days until she could return to the Philippines with enough money to build her family a proper house. Lieutenant Hamdan Al Fari represented everything Nina was not: power, privilege, citizenship in a country that treated her as disposable. At 38, he commanded respect in Dubai's police force, specializing in internal security with access to surveillance systems and evidence storage. Married with children, living in a villa in Jumeirah, driving a luxury SUV that cost more than Nina would earn in 5 years. His world was one of authority and impunity, where problems could be made to disappear with a few phone calls and strategic file deletions. The contrast between them illustrated the brutal mathematics of power in the Gulf states. Immigrant versus citizen, worker versus employer, woman versus man, poverty versus privilege. In any conflict between them, the outcome was predetermined by forces larger than love or justice. Within 48 hours, Dubai police classified Nina's disappearance as voluntary departure. No investigation necessary, no questions asked. Her family's frantic calls from the Philippines were met with bureaucratic silence. The Filipino community in Dubai whispered her name in church but dared not speak it aloud elsewhere, understanding that curiosity about Nina Castillo's fate could result in their own deportation. The security footage vanished. Phone records disappeared. Witnesses developed sudden amnesia. The embassy expressed concern but was constrained by diplomatic protocol. Nina Castillo was being erased from official existence as efficiently as she had been erased from life. But Nina's story didn't begin in Dubai. The story of Nina Castillo begins not in Dubai's glittering towers, but in the endless green expanse of Nueva Ecija's rice fields, where the horizon stretches unbroken except for the occasional carabao trudging through mud and the silhouettes of farmers bent under the Philippine sun. Here, in a modest nipa hut with woven bamboo walls and a corrugated iron roof that drummed with monsoon rains, Nina learned the lessons that would shape her destiny. Lessons about sacrifice, duty, and the dangerous belief that love could conquer any obstacle. The Castillo family lived on the margins of survival. Her father, Mang Roberto, worked fields he would never own, his weathered hands coaxing rice from soil that belonged to wealthy landowners in Manila. Each harvest brought hope, and each drought brought despair. Her mother, Aling Carmen, operated a small sari-sari store from their front room, selling cigarettes, instant noodles, and phone cards to neighbors who had barely more money than she did. The glass jars filled with candies and the faded advertisements for Coca-Cola couldn't hide the mathematical reality of their poverty. Income that never quite matched expenses, dreams that always cost more than they could afford. Nina was the eldest of 4 children, and responsibility settled on her small shoulders like a yoke she never questioned. While her younger siblings played in the dusty roads between houses, Nina helped her mother count coins and organize inventory. She walked her brothers and sister to school each morning, carrying their shared umbrella during rainy season, sharing her lunch when their mother couldn't pack enough food for everyone. Her school uniform bore patches on patches, but she wore it with pride, understanding that education was the family's only hope of escape from the cycle of rural poverty. The sacrifice came during her junior year of high school. Her youngest brother, Miguel, developed a persistent cough that wouldn't respond to traditional remedies or cheap pharmacy medicines. The diagnosis from the provincial hospital hit the family like a typhoon. Tuberculosis, treatable but expensive, requiring months of medication and regular checkups they couldn't afford. Nina made the decision without drama or self-pity. She simply stopped attending classes, took a job at a local electronics factory, and told her parents her education could wait. Miguel's health could not. She always put others before herself. It would become her greatest strength and fatal weakness. Years passed in the rhythm of factory work and family obligation. Nina sent Miguel to treatment, funded her sister's nursing school, and helped her other brother finish his agriculture degree. Her own dreams of college faded like old photographs, but she found satisfaction in watching her siblings achieve what she could not. During evening prayers, kneeling before a small altar decorated with plastic flowers and candles burned down to stubs, she thanked God for the opportunity to serve her family and asked for strength to continue. The crisis that would change everything arrived with the same quiet devastation as all their previous emergencies. Miguel, now healthy but still fragile, needed surgery to repair damage from years of untreated illness. The cost, 200,000 pesos, might as well have been 2 million. The family had exhausted their credit with neighbors, borrowed against future harvests, and sold everything of value except their small plot of land. Nina spent weeks researching overseas employment opportunities, sitting in internet cafes in the town centro, methodically comparing wages and requirements across different countries. Saudi Arabia offered the highest salaries but restricted women's movement severely. Hong Kong provided better working conditions but lower pay. The United Arab Emirates emerged as the optimal choice, higher wages than most destinations, relatively liberal social policies, and a large Filipino community that could provide support and familiarity. She studied basic Arabic phrases from library books, learned about Islamic customs from online forums, and practiced English conversation with her nursing school sister. The preparation felt like training for war, which in many ways it was. The goodbye at Ninoy Aquino International Airport stretched into hours of tears and promises. Nina wore her best dress, carried a suitcase held together with rope, and clutched a rosary that had belonged to her grandmother. Her mother pressed a small envelope into her hands, family photos and a prayer card of Santo Niño. Her father, who rarely showed emotion, wept openly as she disappeared through the departure gate. The Philippine Airlines flight to Dubai represented more than transportation. It was Nina's leap of faith across the impossible distance between poverty and possibility. As Manila's sprawling slums disappeared beneath clouds, she whispered prayers for courage, for success, and for the strength to survive whatever waited in the desert city she had never seen. Dubai's skyline emerged from the Arabian Gulf like a mirage made real. Glass towers reached toward heaven, highways curved like ribbons of light, and the airport itself was larger than any building Nina had ever entered. The culture shock was immediate and overwhelming. The wealth displayed casually in duty-free shops, the multiple languages echoing through terminals, the efficiency of systems that process thousands of workers like her with mechanical precision. Her new reality settled around her like chains made of necessity. 6-day work weeks, shared accommodation with 3 other Filipinas, limited freedom to travel or socialize. The Al Mahmoud family treated her with the distant politeness reserved for competent help, demanding but not cruel, expecting perfection but providing adequate living conditions. 2 years passed in the rhythm of survival. Nina woke at 5 a.m., prepared breakfast for the Al Mahmoud children, cleaned their villa until it sparkled, and sent 80% of her salary home every month. Her weekend escapes, visits to Dubai Mall to window shop, meals at the Filipino food court, phone calls home using prepaid cards, provided brief respites from the loneliness that ate at her soul like acid. The Filipino community centered around St. Mary's Catholic Church became her anchor in an ocean of cultural isolation. Sunday masses in Tagalog, potluck dinners where everyone shared stories of home, prayer groups where women wept freely about the families they had left behind. But even surrounded by countrywomen, Nina felt the particular loneliness of someone who had sacrificed personal happiness for family duty. It was this vulnerability, this desperate hunger for genuine connection, that made her susceptible to what happened next. Dubai Mall on a Friday evening. Fountain show drawing crowds of tourists and residents alike. Nina stood mesmerized by the dancing water and lights, calculating how many months of salary such a spectacle must cost. She was admiring jewelry in a shop window, not coveting, simply appreciating the craftsmanship, when a man approached with words that would seal her fate. "You have beautiful taste," he said in accented English, his tone respectful, his smile warm. Lieutenant Hamdan Al Fari had chosen his target carefully, and his opening line perfectly. Nina blushed, explaining she was just looking, saving money for a gift for her sister's graduation. His response surprised her. He knew about Filipino graduation traditions, asked thoughtful questions about her family, and spoke with the casual authority of someone accustomed to being heard and respected. They exchanged phone numbers. He promised friendship, nothing more. That evening, Nina wrote in her diary, "Met someone kind today. Maybe Dubai isn't so lonely after all. But kindness can be the most dangerous mask of all." The courtship began with the patience of a hunter who understands his prey. Lieutenant Hamdan Al Fari's messages arrived like clockwork. Good morning texts in English, evening voice notes sprinkled with carefully pronounced Tagalog phrases he had clearly practiced. "Kamusta ka, Nina?" he would ask, his accent endearing rather than accurate. The effort touched her heart in ways she hadn't expected. When had anyone last cared enough to learn her language? Their first date unfolded in a small coffee shop in Old Dubai, far from the gleaming malls where Nina's employers might spot her. Hamdan, he insisted she call him by his first name, arrived dressed casually, driving a modest sedan rather than the luxury vehicles she associated with wealthy Emiratis. He listened as she talked about her family, her dreams of returning home with enough money to build her parents a proper house. His questions were thoughtful, his responses genuine. When she mentioned her brother's illness, his eyes filled with what seemed like authentic concern. "You carry such responsibility for someone so young," he said, reaching across the small table to briefly touch her hand. "Your family is lucky to have you." Nina felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with hope. For the first time in years, someone saw her as more than a domestic worker, more than a remittance sender, more than a disposable pair of hands. He spoke of his own unhappiness, a marriage arranged by families, children he loved but a wife who had grown cold and distant. In Islamic law, he explained gently, a man could take a second wife if the first marriage failed to provide companionship and love. The gifts began modestly: a replacement phone when hers finally died, a delicate gold bracelet for her birthday, dinners at restaurants where she could order without checking prices. Nina protested each offering, but Hamdan's explanations always made sense. "You work so hard, habibti. Let me show my appreciation." Their meeting places rotated carefully: different coffee shops, various parks, quiet corners of shopping centers where domestic workers wouldn't normally venture. The secrecy felt romantic rather than suspicious, a special world they were building together. Nina found herself spending extra time on her appearance during her brief afternoon breaks, purchasing small cosmetics with money she should have sent home. But the questions began subtly, woven into conversations so naturally that Nina answered without thinking. Who were her friends? What did she do during her time off? Did she speak with other men? His tone remained gentle, but Nina began to notice how his mood shifted when she mentioned interactions with others. "You have to be careful, habibti," he would say, his hand tightening slightly on hers. "Filipino men here, they talk. They spread rumors about good girls like you. It's better if you keep some distance." By March, Nina's emotional dependency on Hamdan had become complete. The phone he had given her contained apps that shared her location with him at all times. He called it a safety feature. "Dubai can be dangerous for a woman alone. I need to know you're protected." The gifts escalated: expensive perfume, designer handbags, jewelry that cost more than her monthly salary. But each present came with subtle expectations. When Nina protested that she couldn't accept such expensive items, his mood would darken briefly before returning to its usual warmth. "Don't you trust my judgment? Don't you want to make me happy?" His jealousy manifested in increasingly uncomfortable ways. If Nina mentioned a conversation with her male employer, Hamdan's questions would multiply. What exactly had been said? Why had she needed to speak to him? His cultural weaponization was masterful. He claimed to be protecting her virtue according to both Islamic and Filipino traditions, positioning his control as cultural respect rather than possessive obsession. The first time he pushed for physical intimacy, Nina's convictions created an internal war that left her sleepless for nights. Nina's journal entries from this period reveal her growing internal conflict. Pages of prayers for forgiveness mixed with rationalization of her choices, desperate hope for marriage warring with growing unease. When her friend Elena expressed concern about Nina's secretiveness, Nina's response was fierce defense. "He sees my worth. He wants to build a life with me." The pregnancy test showed 2 lines on a sweltering July morning in Dubai Mall's bathroom, purchased with trembling hands from a pharmacy where Nina prayed no one would recognize her. The confirmation sent her to her knees on the cold tile floor, rosary clutched in shaking fingers. When she told Hamdan that evening, his transformation was immediate and terrifying. The gentle lover disappeared, replaced by a cold calculator assessing damage to his reputation. "You did this on purpose," he accused. "You trapped me. This could ruin everything I've worked for." Nina's pleading fell on ears already closed to her voice. She spoke of marriage, of love, of the family they could build together, but Hamdan's responses revealed the true nature of their relationship. She was a liability now, a problem requiring solution. The threats began as suggestions, escalated to demands, and finally became ultimatums. "Accidents happen to girls who cause problems," he said, his tone conversational but his eyes holding promises of violence. "Dubai is full of workers who simply disappear. The desert is very large, habibti, very empty." By August, Nina was completely isolated, forbidden from contacting family or friends, her every movement monitored through the phone that had once seemed like a gift. Her desperate call to her cousin in the Philippines was her final act of rebellion, a last plea for prayers from someone who still remembered her as human. When Hamdan called on August 14th with news of better employment, Nina knew she was walking toward her death. But trapped between immediate violence and faint hope, she chose to believe in the lie that had sustained her for almost a year. August 14th dawned with the oppressive heat that makes Dubai's summer unbearable for those without air-conditioned refuges. Nina woke before her alarm, stomach churning with anxiety that had plagued her for weeks. Mrs. Al-Mahmoud noticed her distraction during breakfast preparation. Nina, usually meticulous, forgot to add sugar to the children's cereal and burned the toast twice. "Are you feeling well?" her employer asked in careful English, genuine concern creasing her features. Nina forced a smile, claiming tiredness, but her hands trembled as she served the morning meal. She had learned to hide her emotions from employers, but terror proved harder to mask than homesickness or exhaustion. During her afternoon break, Nina packed a small cloth bag with items she thought she might need for what Hamdan had described as a job interview with an understanding family. The selection revealed her naivety about her true destination. Clean underwear, a spare uniform, her worn copy of the Bible, and the last photo of her family taken before she left for Dubai. She left behind her small savings, hidden in a coffee tin under her bed, telling herself she would retrieve it after securing this better position. Rosa found her kneeling before the makeshift shrine in their bedroom. A small statue of the Virgin Mary surrounded by battery-operated candles and prayer cards from home. Nina's lips moved in silent prayer for over an hour, her rosary beads clicking softly in the humid air. When Rosa asked about the extended devotion, Nina's response chilled her roommate's blood. "I'm praying for strength to accept God's will, whatever it may be." At 10:47 p.m., Hamdan's call came with the terseness of a military order. "It's time. The car will be there in 20 minutes. Bring nothing except what I told you. Everything else has been arranged." Nina's goodbye to Rosa was hurried, nervous, punctuated by a wave that seemed more like a plea for help than a casual farewell. Mrs. Esperanza from the neighboring apartment later told investigators she had watched from her window, troubled by Nina's obvious distress as she climbed into the black SUV. The Al Bersha apartment building's security cameras captured Nina's entry at exactly 11:47 p.m. The footage shows her hesitation in the marble lobby, checking her phone twice before approaching the elevator. Her body language betrays her fear. Shoulders hunched, frequent glances over her shoulder, the careful steps of someone walking toward their execution. The apartment itself was a stage set for deception. Rented 3 weeks earlier under the name Ahmed Al-Zara, paid for in cash by a man the leasing agent described as unremarkable. Average height, local dress, sunglasses despite the evening hour. The unit was furnished minimally. A bed, a table, 2 chairs, nothing that suggested permanent occupancy or personal investment. Nina's final text message, sent at 11:52 p.m., contained only 2 words, "I'm here." The timestamp would later prove crucial in establishing her disappearance window, but at the moment she typed those letters, Nina still believed she was meeting her lover to discuss their future together. The message was read immediately. No response ever came. What happened in apartment 1247 between 11:52 p.m. and dawn would never be officially recorded. The security cameras that should have captured any exit were mysteriously offline from midnight until 6 a.m. The building's backup systems showed the same technical malfunction. By morning, Nina Castillo had vanished as completely as if she had never existed. Rosa's 6 a.m. alarm found Nina's bed empty and untouched. The initial assumption, that Nina had stayed overnight at her new employment, gave way to panic as hours passed without contact. Mrs. Al-Mahmoud confirmed Nina had never arrived for work. The expensive iPhone, Nina's only link to the man who had promised to transform her life, lay abandoned on Rosa's dresser like evidence at a crime scene. 24 hours after Nina's disappearance, Rosa filed a missing person report at Karama police station. Detective Sarah Al-Mansuri, a 10-year veteran with experience in domestic violence cases, was assigned to investigate. Her first requests for evidence met with obstacles that would define the entire investigation. Security footage mysteriously corrupted, phone records inexplicably incomplete, witnesses suddenly afflicted with collective amnesia. The building management claimed a technical malfunction had affected all recording systems, but forensic analysis revealed deliberate deletion by someone with administrative access. The erasure was surgical. Only Nina's entry and the crucial midnight to dawn window had been removed. Other footage remained intact, suggesting professional knowledge of surveillance systems rather than random equipment failure. Lieutenant Hamdan Al Fari's interview occurred 72 hours after Nina's disappearance. His demeanor was perfect, concerned but not overly emotional, cooperative but not suspiciously eager to help. He claimed limited knowledge of Nina beyond casual acquaintance, expressing appropriate shock at her disappearance. His wife confirmed his presence at home throughout the night of August 14th. The alibi seemed solid, his manner above suspicion. But evidence began accumulating despite systematic obstruction. Nina's shattered phone was discovered half-buried in desert sand near Al Ain, its SIM card missing and memory corrupted by exposure. Her maid's uniform appeared in a charity donation bin behind a mosque, folded neatly with the gold bracelet Hamdan had given her still in the pocket. DNA analysis confirmed the items belonged to Nina, but the investigation budget was suddenly exhausted before further testing could be completed. Detective Al-Mansuri found herself reassigned to traffic enforcement after requesting additional resources. Her replacement showed no interest in pursuing leads that had troubled his predecessor. Within 6 months, the case file was reclassified from missing person to voluntary departure, despite the obvious impossibility of Nina leaving Dubai without her passport or identification documents. The most damning evidence of corruption appeared in immigration records. An exit stamp bearing Nina's name, dated 3 days after her disappearance. The impossibility of someone departing without documents or security footage was dismissed as administrative oversight. Multiple agencies showed coordinated gaps in their records, suggesting influence that reached far beyond a single police officer's authority. Hamdan Al Fari's promotion to head of internal security 6 months later sent a clear message to anyone still questioning Nina's fate. Power protected its own, and justice was a luxury Dubai reserved for cases that didn't threaten the stability of its institutions. The Filipino community understood the message and retreated into fearful silence. Speaking Nina's name publicly became an act of dangerous defiance. Even Rosa stopped asking questions after receiving warnings about her visa status and employment eligibility. Nina Castillo had been erased from official existence as efficiently as she had been erased from life. Her disappearance transformed from crime to administrative inconvenience by the same forces that had made her vulnerable in the first place. In Nueva Ecija, the Castillo family's small nipa hut became a shrine to denial and desperate hope. Nina's mother, Aling Carmen, refused to remove her daughter's photograph from the dinner table, setting a plate for her every evening and waiting for footsteps that would never come. "She's just delayed," she would tell neighbors who brought condolences instead of congratulations. "The phones in Dubai don't work properly. She'll call tomorrow." The financial devastation arrived like a second death. Nina's monthly remittances had been the family's lifeline, money that paid for Miguel's continued medical care, kept her sister in nursing school, and covered basic household expenses. Without her contributions, the carefully constructed stability she had built through years of sacrifice crumbled within months. Miguel's education stopped abruptly when they could no longer afford tuition. Her sister left nursing school to work in a garment factory, dreams of following Nina's path abandoned for immediate survival. Mang Roberto aged a decade in the first year after Nina's disappearance. His hair turned completely white, his back bent further under the weight of grief and financial pressure. Neighbors found him standing in the rice fields at dawn, staring toward the horizon as if Nina might emerge from the morning mist. Alan Carmen's health deteriorated rapidly. Sleepless nights spent listening for phone calls, days consumed by fruitless visits to government offices, weeks without proper meals as she forgot to eat while waiting for news that never came. The community of Nueva Ecija rallied around the grieving family with the solidarity of people who understood poverty's particular cruelties. Neighbors contributed to a search fund, coins and crumpled peso bills collected from families who barely had enough for themselves. The local parish organized special masses for Nina's safe return, then gradually transitioned to prayers for her soul, as hope faded into acceptance of a loss that could never be officially acknowledged. Philippine media briefly embraced Nina's story as representative of the broader struggles facing overseas Filipino workers. Television news segments featured tearful interviews with her parents, newspaper editorials demanded government action, and social media campaigns called for justice under hashtags that trended for days before disappearing into digital oblivion. The Department of Foreign Affairs issued carefully worded statements promising thorough investigation and increased worker protection, but these assurances proved as empty as the promises made to every previous victim's family. The psychological toll of unresolved grief trapped the Castillo family in a purgatory between hope and acceptance. They could not mourn Nina properly without confirmation of her death, but they could not celebrate her memory while clinging to impossible hope for her return. Every knock on their door brought the possibility of news. Every phone ring carried the potential for Nina's voice. Every stranger in the street might be the messenger bringing answers that would finally allow them to